The Oklahoma legislature returned to the Capitol on September 3rd for its first special session in 7 years. Governor Mary Fallin called lawmakers back to address changes in the way lawsuits are handled after the Oklahoma Supreme Court threw out a comprehensive 2009 measure that overhauled the state's civil justice system. The governor maintains the special session is necessary to remove uncertainty over the law and protect businesses and doctors from what they consider to be frivolous lawsuits. Opponents are questioning the cost of the special session and say the legislation will restrict citizens' access to the courts.
So for those that cannot afford an expert review, there's the ability to get this pauper's affidavit, which we believe will meet constitutional muster.
After months of negotiations and impassioned debate from lawmakers, the legislation known as the Comprehensive Tort Reform Act was signed into law in 2009. House Bill 1603 passed by a wide margin, despite concerns of Democrats, including former State Representative Ryan Kiesel, that the measure would not pass constitutional muster.
But if you're truly interested in passing comprehensive lawsuit reform, then you should also be interested in that lawsuit reform being able to stand a constitutional challenge. This bill surely won't.
This year, the Oklahoma Supreme Court agreed, rejecting as unconstitutional a requirement that plaintiffs in professional negligence lawsuits produce a certificate of merit by having an expert endorse their case before it proceeds to trial. In a separate ruling, the court also found the bill violated the Constitution's single subject rule, a process known as log rolling. Governor Mary Fallin responded by calling lawmakers back to the Capitol to address what she calls one of the most important issues facing the state.
It's important for our business and climate. It's important to not only retaining businesses, attracting new businesses, but it's also important to helping with our high medical costs in our state.
The special session is costing taxpayers about $30,000 a day for lawmakers' travel and lodging expenses and payroll for staff members. Fallin maintains the expense is justified.
Having $30,000 a day in costs versus the millions of dollars we've saved over the last several years by lowering our frivolous lawsuits in our state and by also making us more business friendly. And frankly, that's one of the reasons why we have one of the lowest unemployment rates in the nation and been one of the best job growth rates in the nation, is because we've become more business friendly.
Democrats in the House questioned the need for a special session limited to the civil justice system and attempted to expand the session to include other topics.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to amend Executive Order 2013-30 to expand the subject for consideration to include school safety and storm shelters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to instruct the House to call upon Governor Fallin to expand the subject for consideration during the first extraordinary session of the 54th Legislature to include the subject of Oklahoma Corrections Department and the salary and compensation of the correctional officers.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to move to instruct the House to call upon the Governor Fallin to expand the subject for consideration during the first extraordinary session of the 54th Legislature to include the Oklahoma Highway Patrol and the compensation of state troopers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, since we are here to discuss tort reform, I would ask that we amend Executive Order 2013-30 to include Insure Oklahoma.
The motions were quickly rejected, as was an attempt by House Minority Leader Scott Inman to force a vote to immediately end the session.
This was to give you an opportunity to say, let's stop the bleeding. Let's not waste taxpayer dollars. $30,000 for today is enough. Let's go home and take up tort reform next session in February when everybody else addresses all of their other needs.
Democrats also objected to special House rules to limit questions on the measures and prohibit amendments to the bills. Inman noted more than a third of current House members weren't in the legislature when House Bill 1603 was enacted.
I've got members here, Representative Floyd, Representative McDaniel, Representative Matthews, just to name a few, who were not here in 2009. They deserve, their constituents deserve, to give them the time to go through each and every bill, to have it heard in committee, to allow them to give them opportunities to go back into their districts and talk to people at their coffee shops and in town hall formats that usually a legislative session would provide.
3 Republicans, including Representative Mike Reynolds, also objected to the rules changes.
This is the most abusive rule that certainly occurred in the 11 years that I've served in this body.
And it's shameful that we understand the rule so little that we would support it. We talk about doing the people's business. We're doing the business to the people.
House Majority Floor Leader Pam Peterson says the bills under consideration have already been approved by the legislature, and limiting questions helps to move the session along.
We're not stifling debate. The debate will be absolutely the same, an hour total for each bill, half hour for each side. So that has not changed. The thing that has changed is we're allowing 3 hours of Q&A as opposed to just limitless question and answers. The members can ask the author of the bills right now questions, and we can save that time and taxpayer money on the House floor.
After 2 days of political maneuvering, lawmakers began debating the measures on Thursday as a crowd of white-coated medical professionals, all of whom supported the legislation, looked on. Dr. Robert McCaffrey is president of the Oklahoma State Medical Association.
We would like to thank all of our leaders who also saw that this issue was important, for not only for us, but more importantly, for all the people of Oklahoma and for all of our patients.
The first bill up in the Senate was the most contentious. Senate Bill 1X essentially restores the Certificate of Merit. Senator Anthony Sykes insists the High Court's concerns have been addressed.
We have removed their concerns about that it was a special that only applied to professionals. Now it applies evenly to all. Further, we've removed the hurdle of the cost of the affidavit. So I'd say that we're being responsive to the court. I'd also say I think the court has really gone off the deep end on this one.
Senate Minority Leader Sean Burridge argued the bill still creates an illegal special law and predicts the court will again overturn the measure.
Why would we vote again to essentially send the Supreme Court another piece of unconstitutional legislation? Doesn't that make us look a bit strange or even incompetent? Aren't we tired of being scolded by the courts for passing unconstitutional legislation like this?
The measure passed by a margin of 33-11, the closest vote of the day in the Senate, which approved 12 bills on Thursday. The pace was much slower on the House side, even with the time limits imposed by the special House rules. 5 bills were heard during the morning session Thursday, including House Bill 1007. That measure exempts peer review findings from being provided to both sides in malpractice lawsuits. Representative Doug Cox argued the measure would help make bad doctors better.
This bill is going to help those doctors that repeatedly make mistakes, admit that they're wrong, get help, get further education for the betterment of the care of Oklahoma patients.
Democrats such as Richard Morissette disagreed, calling the measure an effort to hide evidence of malpractice in order to protect doctors.
This bill was written for specific reasons to basically hide the mistakes of those individuals that are not properly being reviewed by the medical profession. Clean up your own house, and you won't have to worry about lawsuits.
Lawmakers approved all 24 measures that came up in the House and Senate Thursday. Those bills next head to the opposite chamber for consideration. Critics of the special session contend more sessions like this are likely if the legislature ignores the Supreme Court's warnings regarding log rolling.
How many bills last session did we pass, very high-profile bills, that violated the same single subject rule? Are we going to get called back into a special session for workers' comp in 2 years? Are we going to get called back into a special session for the Capitol repairs?
Senate President Pro Tem Brian Bingman believes the bills will pass constitutional muster, but admits
you never know what the courts will do, you know. That we thought we had a bill that was single subject, House Bill 1603 and 09, so their interpretation sometimes is different than the legislature.
Bingman believes the session has gone smoothly so far and could be finished in just a few more days.